My name is Gabe Ostrander. I'm 30 years old, and for most of my life I believed that charm was just theft wearing a nicer coat. I learned that from my father. He could stand in a bank lobby and make 3 loan officers laugh until they forgot to read the numbers. And he could stand in our kitchen and make my mother believe that this year would be different, and it never was. He charmed our orchard into the ground one warm handshake at a time. Then the drink came, and the drink finished what the charm started. By the time we buried him, we owed more than the land was worth, and the man everyone in the valley had loved was gone, and the debt he left behind was mine alone to carry. So I stopped smiling at strangers. I ran the orchard by myself, up in the Blue Ridge foothills of the Shenandoah Valley, 90 acres of apples that my grandfather planted and my father nearly killed. I made small batch cider in a cold stone building at the edge of the property, and I sold it careful and quiet, and I trusted no one who spoke too smoothly. I told myself that if I kept my head down and my hands busy, the trees would forgive us and the bank would leave me be. Neither one turned out to be quite true. The autumn I turned 30, the note came due. Cutter's Trust in town held the mortgage, and the manager there, a tired man named Delroy Pace, told me plain that I had until the last day of November to bring the account current, or the bank would begin the process of taking the land. He did not enjoy telling me that. I could see it on him, but he told me all the same. And at the very same time, a company called Ashby Beverage had come into the valley like a change in the weather. They bottled cider and juice for half the country, and they had decided that the Shenandoah made a pretty picture on a label. So they were buying up small orchards one by one and squeezing the growers' co-op that the rest of us depended on to sell our fruit at a fair price. Our co-op had a contract vote coming that fall, and everyone knew that if Ashby got its hooks into that vote, the price they would pay us for apples would slide, year over year, below what it cost to grow them. That is how they did it. Not with a fight. With patience and math and a smile. I was 30 years old, alone, and cornered from 2 directions at once, the bank on one side and the company on the other, and no clear way out of either. That was the week Rowan Ashby walked up my lane and asked for harvest work. She did not tell me her last name that first day. She said Rowan, only Rowan, and she said she picked fast and clean and did not need much. And she had a canvas bag over her shoulder and a pair of boots that had actually been worn into the shape of a working foot. I did not have money to pay a picker. I told her that flat out, almost hoping to send her back down the lane. She said she would work for a cot in the packing loft, 3 meals a day, and whatever cider I could spare when the season closed. It was a poor bargain for her, and we both knew it. I should have said no. I have thought about that 1,000 times since. That one word I did not say. But she was already looking up into the old wine saps like she was reading them, tilting her head to see how the fruit hung, and something about the way she stood there, quiet and unbothered by my rudeness, made me hand her a picking sack instead of a goodbye. I said something as I gave it to her. I meant it as a warning, or a joke, or maybe both. The kind of thing a bitter man says to keep a stranger at a distance. I looked at her, at how she carried herself, at the plain sense of somewhere better that hung on her even in a work coat, and I said, "A woman like you is wasted on a broke man's orchard." I said it half laughing, expecting her to agree and leave. She did not leave. She looked at me for a long moment, and something moved behind her eyes that I did not understand yet, and she said, "Then it's a good thing I'm not who you think I am." And she took the sack out of my hand and walked into the trees and started to pick. I stood there feeling like I had knocked on a wall and heard a room on the other side that I had not known was there. I let it go. It was harvest, and I had 90 acres of worry, and I did not have the time to wonder about a picker who talked like that. I would have plenty of time to wonder later. I want to tell you the truth of it right at the start, because the truth is the whole reason I am telling this at all. The woman who could have ended my orchard forever, the one whose own family was built to swallow places exactly like mine, turned out to be the only reason it is still standing today. If you had told me that in the first week, I would have laughed in your face. I did not have much laughter left back then, in those days. She gave that back to me too, along with everything else. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me tell it the way it happened in order, the way the trees taught me to do everything, one season at a time. She was a strange kind of worker. Most seasonal pickers are loud, or lazy, or gone by Friday when the novelty wears off and the shoulders start to ache. Rowan was none of those. She was up before me, which I had not thought was possible, and she picked with both hands in that rolling motion that takes most people years to learn, lifting and twisting each apple, so the little spur stayed on the branch to bear next year's fruit. She never bruised a single one. She stacked the crates in the shed so the airflow ran through them and the fruit would keep. By the second week of harvest, I had stopped watching her to catch her mistakes because there were none to catch, and I had started watching her because I could not, for the life of me, figure her out. She knew things she had no business knowing. One evening, I was sitting on the porch cursing quietly at my ledger, trying to make the columns come out to something other than ruin, and she looked over my shoulder at the price I was getting for my pressing apples and said, mild as anything, that I was leaving money on the table selling by the bushel when I could be selling by the story. I asked her a little sharp what a picker knew about markets. She went quiet, the particular kind of quiet a person goes when they have almost stepped on a nail they knew was in the floorboard, and she said she used to work in an office and hated it and left it there. I let it go. I should have listened harder to the almost stepping. There were a dozen of those moments across that autumn, small tells, little slips of knowledge, and I filed each one away as a curiosity instead of a clue. There was a care in her that I did not know what to do with. She noticed things about a person. She noticed that I favored my left knee on the tall ladders, and without a word about it, she moved the biggest trees to her own picking list. She noticed that I ate standing up over the kitchen sink like a man who had forgotten that meals were meant for sitting down, and she started, quietly, setting 2 plates at the table. She noticed the photograph on the mantel, my grandfather in his shirt sleeves standing under a tree that no longer stood, and instead of ignoring it the way most people ignore an old man in a picture, she asked me about him, gently, and then she listened to the answer like it mattered to her. Nobody had listened to me like that in a long time. I had gotten used to being a man that other people talked around. So I showed her the old trees. I still do not entirely know why. There is a back block on the orchard that my grandfather set aside and kept, the ancient ones, gnarled and low and half wild. The trees my father had wanted to bulldoze for years because they did not produce enough uniform fruit for the wholesale bins. I had saved them out of stubbornness more than any good business sense. I walked Rowan up through them at dusk one evening near the end of the second week, and I told her their names as we went, the old American names, the Black Twig and the Grimes Golden and the Harrison and the Newtown Pippin, apples that the big packers had forgotten because they did not ship pretty and did not ripen all on the same convenient day. She walked among those trees the way a person walks through a church they were not expecting to find. She touched the bark. She smelled a windfall apple in her cupped hands with her eyes closed. I had never shown that block to anyone. I do not know what it was about her that opened my hand. And then, near the top, I showed her the one tree I had never shown a living soul. At the very top of the back block, Standing alone on a rise where it caught the first light and the last, was a single old apple tree that my grandfather had always called the mother tree. It was the last living tree of a variety our family had grown for 4 generations, an apple that no one else in the world seemed to have anymore. My grandfather called it the Ostrander amber. He said his own grandfather had carried the first cutting of it over the mountains wrapped in a wet rag, back before there were roads worth the name, and had grafted it onto wild stock the first spring he had land of his own. The apple itself was small and russetted, and honestly homely, the kind of fruit a grocery store would never stock. But it tasted like honey and wood smoke, and something underneath that you could not quite put a name to, and it made a cider that stopped people mid-sentence, that made them set the glass down and go quiet and ask what on earth they were drinking. The trouble was that the tree was old. It leaned harder every year. Some winters, I was genuinely sure it would not wake up in the spring. And in all my years, I had never once grafted it, never made a copy, never taken so much as a twig, because some superstitious animal part of me was afraid that if I cut into it, the tree would take the cutting as permission to finally lie down and die. Rowan stood in front of that tree for a long time without saying anything. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed. She said that a tree like that could not be allowed to simply disappear from the world. She said it almost angrily, as if it were a wrong that somebody needed to right, as if she had personally seen too many rare and irreplaceable things get bulldozed for a quarter's profit. I told her the story then of how my father had once, in a bad year, tried to sell the entire back block, the mother tree included, to a man who wanted to put up cabins, and how my grandfather had stood in the middle of the lane with an old shotgun broken open over his arm until the surveyor got back in his car and drove away and never came back. Rowan laughed at that, a real laugh, but her eyes were wet at the same time, and I remember standing there in the last of the light thinking that I had never in my life met anyone who arrived at caring about the right things this quickly. There were things I did not know, and the not knowing sat over that whole autumn like a low gray sky that would not lift. I did not know who she really was, not truly. I did not know why a woman who could read a market ledger upside down and casually mention graft union failure rates was sleeping in my drafty packing loft in exchange for cider. I did not know what Ashby Beverage actually wanted with our valley, whether it was really about apples at all or about something colder and further off that I could not see the shape of. And underneath all of it, I did not know whether I could make the note, whether I could pull enough real money out of 90 acres of debt-heavy trees before the last day of November to keep the only thing my family had left in the world. Every single one of those questions had a hook set in me, and every day that passed, the hooks pulled a little harder. I would lie awake in the farmhouse and hear them all pulling at once. I told myself the smart thing to do was to keep her at arm's length. I was not built to trust a person who had appeared out of nowhere and then fit into my life so neatly, like she had been cut to the exact shape of the hole in it. My father had been the charming one, the one who fit everywhere, and look what his fitting had cost us. I did not want to be the fool standing on the other side of charm ever again in my life. But the strange thing was that Rowan was not charming, not the way he had been. She did not perform. She did not work a room or work me. She just showed up, morning after morning, and did the work, and noticed things, and cared, and slowly, without my permission, the wall I had spent 10 years building started to feel less like a fortification that protected me, and more like a small locked room that I had shut myself inside a long time ago and forgotten how to leave. One cold, clear morning, near the end of the 3rd week, I made a decision that I did not fully understand even as I was making it. I took my grandfather's grafting knife and my roll of budding tape and my little tin of sealing wax, and I walked down to the mother tree, and I did the thing I had been too afraid to do for years. I cut cyan wood. My hands were not steady. I selected 3 clean pencil-thick shoots from the last year's growth, the wood with the best buds, and I wrapped them carefully the way my grandfather had taught me when I was a boy. Then I went to the nursery row, and I chose the strongest young rootstock I had, and I grafted the Ostrander amber onto it, a whip-hand tongue graft, matching the 2 green cambium layers together and binding them tight, pressing the living tissue of the old tree against the living tissue of the young one like a promise made in wood. And when it was done and wrapped and sealed against the weather, I did something I still cannot fully explain to myself. I cut a second length of that cyan wood, and I grafted it onto a little potted stalk, and I carried it back to the house, and I gave it to Rowan. I told her plainly what it was. I told her it was the mother tree, the Ostrander amber, the whole 4 generations of it, alive in her 2 hands. I told her that if I ever dropped dead in the orchard, or if the bank took the place out from under me, at least the variety would go on somewhere in the world in her keeping and would not vanish. I meant it as a practical thing, a sensible hedge against loss, a copy stored somewhere safe. But when I set that little pot into her arms, she looked down at it and then up at me, and her whole face came apart in a way I was not remotely prepared for. She said very quietly that no one had ever given her anything real before. I did not understand her. She said that people had given her a great many things in her life, expensive things, and that not one single one of them had ever cost the person giving it anything that actually mattered. I did not know what to make of that. I understood only that a woman I could not figure out was standing in my kitchen, holding my entire inheritance in a plastic nursery pot and crying over it, and that in that moment, I would have given her the whole tree, roots and all, if she had only asked me for it. Then the frost came, and everything I thought I understood came down at once. It was later in the season than any killing frost had a right to arrive, and the radio out of Harrisonburg called for a clear, cold night, with the temperature dropping past 26 degrees before dawn. I still had 2 full blocks of late apples hanging on the trees, unpicked, and I had the young nursery of new grafts, my brand new Ostrander amber among them, that a hard freeze would murder in a matter of hours. A late killing frost like that one could take an entire year of work, and the single graft I had finally, after all those years, worked up the courage to make, all in one black night. I did not have wind machines. I did not have the money that wind machines cost, not this year, maybe not ever. What I had was a row of smudge pots older than I was, a water pump, a handful of sprinkler lines, and one exhausted picker, who I fully expected to go inside and sleep like a sensible person. Rowan did not go inside. That is the thing I keep coming back to, all these years later. She could have. She had every reason to. She was a seasonal worker with no real stake in whether my orchard lived or died. A woman who could have walked down the lane the next morning to some other farm and some other harvest and never thought of me again. Instead, she pulled her coat on and tied her boots and worked beside me the whole black length of that night. We lit the smudge pots one by one and set them through the low ground where the cold air pools and does its worst. We ran the sprinkler lines out over the nursery so the freezing water would sheath the young grafts in a skin of ice and hold them at exactly 32 degrees, which sounds backward until you understand it and is the oldest trick in the whole book. We hauled and lit and dragged and stamped our numb feet and blew on our hands, and somewhere past 3 in the morning, standing between 2 rows with our breath hanging white in the pot light and the smudge smoke drifting gold and low across the ground, she leaned into me, and I put my arm around her, and neither one of us said a single word. It was the closest I had felt to another living human being in 10 years. The orchard was fighting for its life all around us, and so I realized standing there was I, and she had chosen, for no reason I could see, to stay out in the cold and fight for both. By dawn, the temperature broke. The sun came up and the danger passed, and the grafts had lived. The late apples had lived. We climbed to the top of the back block and stood by the old mother tree as the sun came up pink and then gold over the far ridges, the two of us filthy and half frozen and grinning at each other like a pair of fools. And for one whole minute, maybe the first in a decade, I let myself believe that I had finally been handed something good, something that would stay. Then Rowan told me who she was. She told me because she could not carry it one more day. She said to me much later, not after a night like that one. She stood there in the new sunlight with the smudged smoke still hanging in the low ground below us, and she said that her full name was Rowan Ashby. She said that the Ashby of Ashby Beverage, the company that was at that very moment moving through our valley to buy or break every small orchard in it, mine included, was her father. She said she had grown up inside that company, inside all that money, groomed to run it one day. And she said that a year ago she had walked away from the whole of it, from the fortune and the name, and the glass tower with her family's name across the top, because she had looked around her one ordinary morning and understood that nothing in her entire life was real. Nothing she had ever touched had roots. So she had come to the mountains as nobody, as just Rowan, to find something that did. She said, with her voice breaking, that she had never once planned to find me. I want to tell you that I understood. I did not. Everything I had been afraid of for my whole life stood up inside me at the same time. Charm, money. A smooth and lovely story that made a lonely fool feel special, right up until the moment the trap swung shut behind him. I heard my father's easy laugh ringing in that bank lobby. I stepped back from her, the way you step back from something hot. And I said terrible things. I said that of course, the one single person in 10 years who had gotten inside my walls turned out to be the exact family that was coming to take my land. I said that I did not know one true thing about her, not one. I said that the graft, the tree, the whole night, all of it had been given to a lie wearing a work coat. She did not argue with me. She did not defend herself. She just stood there and took every word of it, holding that little potted graft against her chest like the last warm thing left in the world. And she let me be as cruel as 10 years of fear needed me to be. Then she turned and went up to the loft and packed her canvas bag, and I stood in my own orchard and let her. She did not leave the valley, though. That is the thing I learned over the next 2 weeks, which were the worst 2 weeks of the entire story. She took a small room above the hardware store in town, and she did not come back up my lane, but she did not run home to the glass tower either. She stayed, and while she stayed, her father came. Marcus Ashby arrived in the valley the way hard weather arrives, and he did not come to my orchard first. He was too smart for that. He came to the co-op. Ashby Beverage put an offer in front of all the growers that was built, carefully, to look like a rescue and to work like a slow noose. They would sign the co-op to a 5-year supply contract at a fixed price, and that price was set just high enough in the first year to tempt a room full of frightened, tired growers, and just low enough across the 5 years that followed to quietly bleed every last one of them white. And once the co-op was locked into that contract, Ashby would be the only buyer left in the valley, and a seller with only one buyer is not really a seller at all. Delroy Pace at the bank made it very plain to me around then, not unkindly, that if I could not make my November note, the land would go up for sale, and that there was exactly one party circling the valley with the ready cash to buy it. I sat at my kitchen table and did the arithmetic in the lamplight. My orchard, my grandfather's 90 acres, the whole back block, the mother tree herself, all of it was a matter of days from becoming a single line on Marcus Ashby's balance sheet. My pride told me to face it alone, the way I had faced everything my whole life. But something Rowan had said kept turning itself over and over in my mind, in her voice. Selling by the story, not by the bushel. I had a story that no one else in that valley had. I had the last living mother tree of a lost heirloom apple, 4 generations deep, and I had cider pressed from it that stopped strangers mid-sentence and made them go quiet. So in the last 2 weeks before the co-op vote, I did not really sleep. I pressed the Ostrander amber, all of it. I drove bottles down to a cider judge in Charlottesville and to a heritage fruit society that kept the old lost varieties, and to a woman who had spent her life writing about vanished American apples. And every single one of them told me the same thing back, in their own different words, that the Ostrander amber had been listed as extinct, gone, lost for the better part of a century. That a proven, living mother tree of a lost heritage variety, with real fruit and real cider in hand to show for it, was not some homely little curiosity in the corner of a failing orchard. It was rare in the specific way that serious money sits up and notices. It was, they told me, worth more standing right where it stood than my entire 90 acres were worth, as a number scratched into a bank's ledger. The co-op meeting was held in the Grange Hall on the second Tuesday of November, and the whole valley turned out for it. Every grower I knew, both of the town bankers and Marcus Ashby himself, in a coat that had cost more than my truck, standing up at the front of the hall like a man who already had the deed in his pocket. He made his speech, and he was good at it. He was so good, better than my father had ever dreamed of being. He talked about partnership, and about security, and about the hard, cold truth of modern farming in a world that did not care about small men on small land. He had taken his daughter's quiet certainty and forged it into a blade, and he swung it well. He called for the vote on the supply contract. And around the hall, my neighbors, good men and women staring down the very same November that I was, began, slowly, to nod. Because a low, sure price dangled in front of a frightened person feels a great deal safer than a proud and lonesome death. Then Rowan stood up from the very back of the hall. She was not on the program. I do not think Marcus even knew she was still in the valley until she rose to her feet, because when he saw her stand, something crossed his face that I had never once expected to see on a man like him, and that something was fear. She walked up the center aisle to the front of the room. She said her name out loud, her whole name, Rowan Ashby, so that every single person in that hall understood exactly who she was and exactly whose daughter she was. And then she took her father's own weapons out of his hands and turned them around on him. She laid out the 5-year math on the chalkboard in plain, patient numbers, so that every grower in the room could see the noose hidden neatly inside the gift. She told them quietly what Ashby Beverage had done to the last valley it had rescued the same way, 3 states over, where the growers now worked as hired hands on the land they used to own outright. And then she pointed across the hall at me, and she said that this valley did not need a buyer, it needed a name, and that it already had one standing right there. She told the whole room about the Ostrander amber, a variety the world had believed was extinct, alive and bearing on the rise behind my house. And she told them, in real dollars, what the heritage market would pay for cider and cyanwood off a proven lost apple. She said the co-op could build a whole valley of story fruit, of old lost varieties brought back, that a company like Ashby could never buy and never match and never fake, because you cannot manufacture 4 generations. You cannot press 100 years into a factory. She said the realest things in the world simply cannot be purchased at any price. Then she turned and looked straight at her father in front of everyone, and she told him plainly that she was not who he thought she was either. The vote failed. The supply contract died right there in that hall, by a show of raised hands, my neighbor's hands, lifted into the air because a woman had stood up and handed them a truer story than the one that fear had been telling them. Marcus Ashby left the valley that same night, and the buyout collapsed along with the vote, because a squeeze like his only works when the growers are alone and afraid and each fighting for himself, and they were not alone anymore. Rowan had seen to that. The bank note was the last thing left standing between me and the end. But by then, it was no longer the wall it had been. The Heritage Fruit Society bought cyanwood from the mother tree at a figure that made Delroy Pace read the paper twice, and then a third time. A cider distributor who had heard about the night in the Grange Hall drove up my lane wanting the entire Ostrander amber pressing, and wanting it at a price by the story and not by the bushel. I made the November note with 11 days still to spare. I paid it standing at Delroy's desk in my work clothes, my hands still stained from the press, and I walked out of that bank owing no man alive a single thing, for the first time in my whole grown life. Rowan renounced her stake in Ashby Beverage that winter. She signed away a fortune that most people would trade their souls just to stand near. She did not quietly redirect it to herself, the way a clever person might have. She put what leverage she still held into a small trust for the growers' co-op, seed money for the Heritage Fruit venture she had described in the Grange Hall, and then she walked away from the rest of it clean, exactly the way she had told me she wanted to on that first cold sunrise, back when I had not known nearly enough to believe her. She came back up my lane in December, on foot, with her canvas bag over her shoulder and the little potted Ostrander amber graft still alive and green in her arms. She had kept it through everything, through all of it, watered and warm on a windowsill above a hardware store. She stopped in the same stretch of lane where my grandfather had once stood with a broken shotgun over his arm, and she asked me, quietly, whether there was still any harvest work to be had, even though the harvest had been over for weeks, and we both knew perfectly well that she was asking me something else entirely. I did not make a joke this time. I did not have a wall left to defend. I walked down the lane to her, and I lifted that little pot out of her arms and set it down careful in the grass. And then I said the truest thing I had in me, which was that I had been wrong, deeply wrong to ever call it a lie, because that little tree had turned out to be the realest thing either one of us had ever owned, and that I wanted to plant it with her, and stay, and see together what 4 more generations might do. We planted the graft that spring, at the very top of the back block, in the good sun right beside the old leaning mother tree, so that the last of the line and the first of the next one stood there together, side by side, root to root. We were married under those 2 trees when the blossom came in front of the whole co-op, all my neighbors who had raised their hands in the Grange Hall for a broke man and a rare apple. When the man asked me if I would have her, I said that I already had, that I had chosen her back on the first cold night she would not go inside. And Rowan chose the orchard, and she chose me. She had walked away from more money than I will see in 10 lifetimes, and she stood there in a plain work dress under an apple tree that all that money had somehow overlooked. And she said, so the whole valley could hear it, that she had never once in her life been so rich. I told you at the very start that charm was only theft wearing a nicer coat, and I still believe that my father was exactly that. But I was wrong to think that was the whole of the world. Some things cannot be charmed into being, and they cannot be bought at any price, because they do not answer to money at all. They answer only to time, and to a pair of working hands, and to somebody who is willing to stay out through the whole cold night. You cannot manufacture 4 generations. You cannot buy a thing with roots already in the ground. You can only take one green living piece and set it against another and wrap the 2 of them tight and then wait, in faith, through a long season whose end you cannot see, and trust that they will grow together into something that neither one could ever have become alone. That, I have come to believe, is what worth actually is. It is not counted. It is not for sale. It is grown slowly by somebody who decided to stay. My grandfather knew it in his bones, and my father forgot it. And in the end, it took a woman who had owned everything and wanted almost none of it to graft that knowledge back onto me, standing under the last tree of a lost apple. On the morning the killing frost broke, and the sun came up gold over the ridge. Would you have walked away from a fortune for something real?